Welcome to Money Monday on Business Edge, and this time we'll be talking about what first-time investors should know. And the investment environment can be very challenging and, of course, dynamic between the lingo and the numbers and, of course, figures. Investing can also be overwhelming to those trying it for the first time. Now, no one goes into investing to lose money, but a lot of first-time investors get their fingers burned and either never go back to investing or take some time off. But preparation and adequate knowledge will help you move through the waters and help you minimize losses. And that's why we have a distinguished guest on the show this morning to talk about this issue, and it has to do with what first-timers should know about investments. We have Victor Aluyi, who is the Vice President and Head Investment, Sankore Global Investments, and he's joining us to look at this topic. You're welcome, Victor.
Thanks for having me. Morning.
All right, so we understand the fact that it takes people a whole lot of time when it comes to making first-time investments, and that has to do with inadequate knowledge, inadequate education, and of course that helps them or that prevents them in making the financial decisions they need when it comes to picking on investments. So tell us, what are those three critical or important things they should hold on to or they should know when it comes to investments?
All right, thanks. I mean, one of the first things, I'd say probably the most important thing you need to understand before going into investments is to be clear that it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's something that requires quite a lot of discipline, and that obviously takes time. You also have to figure out what your own risk appetite is. What sort of appetite do you have to stomach losses? There are people who can stomach losses as long as they know and have an understanding that, those losses could be paid back over time, while there are some that cannot stomach losses for whatever reason. So you have to figure out what your risk appetite is. And it does vary from person to person. This is, a behavioral thing. It really doesn't have anything to do with investment itself. But it is important that you understand that, because a lack of understanding of your own risk preferences can be a formidable challenge, particularly when you then dip your toes into the waters. It could, certainly throw you off balance. And that's the reason, in what you made allusion to earlier, the fact that some people have gotten burnt in the market and just have never been able to return, because they didn't quite understand their own risk appetite. And it's also important to have a really strong working knowledge of the investment landscape. You don't necessarily have to do this by yourself or know it by yourself. But again, the ability to identify, wealth managers or investment managers that can essentially handhold you through that process, becomes really, really critical. But again, I emphasize that, investment is a very strong discipline. It's a strict one, and it certainly isn't a get-rich-quick scheme.
All right, Victor, thank you so much. Now, there are lots of financial assets and, of course, investments that are available for everyone, but not everyone can plunge into those deeps and be able to make enough money from it. So tell us, what are those instruments that you would recommend for first-time investors?
I think for first-time investors, again, to ensure that you are somewhat protected from the vagaries in the market, because the market can be very volatile. It can be wild sometimes. I think the best way to start out is through, structures that offer some kind of protection, right? So, such like a mutual fund, for instance, right? And there are different kinds of mutual funds. Again, this again highlights the fact that it is important that you understand your risk appetite. There are mutual funds that are a bit more risk preferring. There are mutual funds that don't take much risk. They basically offer, significant protection of your capital and some small return, while some offer, the potential of great returns, but then the risk on that is, can be quite high. So I think that for first-time investors, one of the key ways to, delve into the financial markets would be through the structure known as, mutual funds. The idea, again, is that, what these funds do is to pull together investors of a like mind, into a huge bucket where they are able to take advantage of, market movement, able to get better rates, able to get better protection and all of that. So I'd say that, for first timers, a mutual fund is certainly a very strong and a veritable tool through which they can, engage the financial markets.
Well, it is understandable, Victor, that we all don't have the same kind of risk appetite. And of course, investments or investing in particular stock or assets could be risky, or should we say riskier than others. So what sort of risk tolerance would you say first-time investors should consider even as a step into the terrain?
Again, like I said, that really depends on the individual because at the end of the day, there are people who, regardless of what's happening in the investment world, they are just natural risk takers, right? Again, there are people who have been in the investment world and they are very risk averse. So I think that risk preference is really separate from the financial markets, right? It's important to understand your risk appetite outside of investment, really. Again, it just plays to your everyday life. There are people who are just natural risk takers, regardless of, investments and all of that. Now that, trait will certainly play into the type of investments that they can take, the kind of risk that they can stomach, and how they'll be able to build wealth over time. It is important that your risk appetite lines up with how you're investing, because if it doesn't, it can certainly throw you off balance and create a situation where you are then disillusioned about investment. So it really doesn't have much to do with investment, but more actually to do with the character and the makeup of whoever it is that is trying to invest at the end of the day.
Victor, now there are fears of a U.S. recession. Markets have been volatile as of late. So if you would advise, would you say it is time for first-time investors to actually venture into the market now?
It's a really tough time. 2020, for instance, was the year where anybody could have made money from the market. Last year was also quite decent. But this is the year where you have to prove your mettle. This is the year where you have to show your skill as an investment manager. And I don't know that it's exactly a great time for a first-timer to come in. However, again, there are structures through which first-timers can come in, such as mutual funds. Again, this then depends on the kind of risk appetite that you have. You also must view this as a long-term play. It's not what happens in the market over the next couple of months or even a year that counts. It's a long-term play. So you have to be in it for the long haul. Like I said, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, which unfortunately a lot of people have termed it to be these days. That's not the idea for investment. It's a long-term thing. The idea is to build capital. The idea for investment is to create a conduit through which, sustainable capital formation can be built, and then that capital can get rewarded over time, right? So now it's a very volatile period in the market, one that even investment professionals with years of experience are having to tread with a lot of caution, So I would say that, not necessarily a great time, but for investors who are, looking to take a plunge, particularly because, again, asset prices have become, significantly cheaper than they were a year or two ago. This could provide a really great opportunity for people to probably leg in. I think the preferred structure at this point would be through mutual funds or, an investment advisor.
All right. Thank you so much, Victor Aluyi, for joining us on Money Monday.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, you would understand the fact that it could be quite challenging most time for a first-time investor plunging into a terrain that you are not really vast in. But then a bit of education, having that time to study the market forces, study the stocks, study the assets, study as many as you can so that you can have that informed decision will help you minimize losses and help you reduce that possibility of being confused when you are about choosing the kind of investments you want to put your fund or you want to put your money into. And that is why we bring this segment on every Monday to educate you on what you need to do if you are about investing in any form of investments. And I want to say big thank you to Victor. Now let's take you through NC4 to watch even as we track the 4 developing business stories that we are looking at and looking out for. We start by telling you that in the first half of 2022, Egypt's food exports increased by 2.4% to 976 million Egyptian pounds. The monthly report of the Food Export Council reported that the value of exports from the food sector totaled $2.169 billion, up from $2.118 billion in the corresponding period of the year 2021. Now, the Bank of Ghana has given strong indication that the recently approved $750 million Afrexim loan facility by Parliament, once disbursed, among other measures, will boost the foreign exchange position of the country and help restore confidence in the city. The additional measures include the cocoa syndication loan, which is expected in the last quarter of the year 2022 and expected to provide more foreign currency to help address the city depreciation. In Kenya, the weekly Mombasa tea auction held on the 10th and 11th of August 2022 had 12.4 million kilograms of tea offered for sale. The amount on offer increased from 11.9 million kilograms offered during the previous sale and from 11 million kilograms offered during a similar period last year. And finally, Mozambique has announced that it will start exporting liquefied natural gas extracted from the Coral South field off the coast of Palma district in the northern province of Cabo Delgado in October. According to estimates, the initial production could contribute an additional 1.1 percentage points to the country's economic growth in the year 2023. And that's about it on today's edition of Business Edge. Do not forget that you can visit our social media platforms at News Central TV. You can also download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store, while you can also visit our websites www.newscentral.africa for more juicy stories that we have for you there. Do not forget that at the top of the hour, it will be time for the News Central Now. My name is Lekan Onabanjo. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you again some other time. That should be tomorrow.